Right now, the sea that carries 20% of the world's oil has come to a dead stop. The Strait of Hormuz, barely 33 kilometers wide, is packed with over 150 tankers and cargo ships sitting completely motionless. Iran's Revolutionary Guard made it clear, "We will fire on every ship that enters not one drop of oil leaves this region." 9 days since the US and Israel launched simultaneous strikes on Iran on February 28th, Brent crude has surged 34% in 1 week, smashing past $93 a barrel. American gas prices hit $3. 41 cents a gallon, up 43 cents in 7 days. Inside Iran, at least 1,332 people are dead, along with 7 U.S. troops and 12 Israeli civilians. 20% of global seaborne oil, and 20% of all LNG flows through this single passage. Morgan Stanley warns every 10% oil price jump pushes Korean inflation up 0.6 points, and Japan relies on the Middle East for 95% of its crude. If this blockade lasts one more month, $150 oil becomes reality, and every economy on Earth takes the hit. March 2026. The world is standing in the middle of an oil war. The war started in the early hours of February 28th. President Trump gave the strike order from aboard Air Force One, and within minutes, American cruise missiles and Israeli fighter jets were hammering targets across Iran. Tehran, Isfahan, Kermanshah, and Bushehr. The U.S. codenamed it Epic Fury, Israel called it Roaring Lion, and the scale was staggering. The Israeli Air Force sent 200 jets on its largest combat sortie ever, dropping over 1,200 bombs in 24 hours. Why did America attack? Trump told Congress that Iran had restarted its nuclear weapons program and was building missiles that could reach the homeland. But the International Atomic Energy Agency said there was no evidence of an organized weapons program. It got worse, multiple outlets reported. The Pentagon admitted in closed-door briefings that zero intelligence pointed to Iran, planning a first strike on U.S. forces. The bombs fell anyway. The Washington Post reported that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman personally pressured Trump multiple times to hit Iran, and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu pulled the U.S. into the war. Secretary of State Rubio later admitted Israel had dragged America into the conflict. Trump disagreed, but the damage to the narrative was done. The question that now haunts Washington is simple: if no imminent threat existed, why did this war start at all? The first shockwave was the killing of Iran's supreme leader. On February 28th, strikes hit the compound of Ayatollah Khamenei, killing him along with his daughter, son-in-law, and grandchild. His wife died from her injuries 2 days later. Defense Minister Nasirzadeh, Revolutionary Guard commander, Pakpour, and Chief of Staff Mousavi were all eliminated. CBS reported 40 senior officials dead on day one alone. Iran hit back immediately under Operation True Promise 4, launching hundreds of ballistic missiles and drones at Tel Aviv and Haifa, while simultaneously striking U.S. bases across the Gulf. Al Udeid in Qatar, Ali Al Salem in Kuwait, Al Dhafra in the UAE, and the 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain all took missile barrages. Iran went further. It attacked Saudi Aramco's Ras Tanura refinery, sent drones at Dubai International Airport, and scored a direct hit on the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait. Qatar shot down 2 Iranian Su-24 bombers that violated its airspace, becoming the first nation in this war to down an Iranian military jet. The conflict had blown past Iran's borders and engulfed the entire Persian Gulf, dragging in nations that had desperately tried to stay on the sidelines. Energy markets were already in panic, but the worst was still coming. The real twist came from the sea. On March 2nd, a senior IRGC commander declared, "The Strait of Hormuz is closed. We will fire on any ship that tries to enter." 20% of all seaborne crude, roughly 21 million barrels a day, passes through this narrow strait, and now none of it was moving. NPR called it about as wrong as things could go for global oil markets. 2 tankers were attacked off. Oman and the American-flagged Stena Imperative was hit. Then something even more stunning happened in the Indian Ocean. A U.S. Navy submarine sank the Iranian frigate Iris Dina, 74 kilometers south of Sri Lanka. The first submarine kill since the Falklands War, and the first by an American sub since World War II. Sri Lanka's Navy rescued 32 survivors, but pulled 87 bodies from the water. According to U.S. military reports, 43 Iranian warships have now been sunk in total, effectively destroying Iran's entire naval capability. The Hormuz closure is not just a military crisis, it is an economic earthquake. 30% of Europe's jet fuel and a fifth of the world's LNG transit through this choke point. Ship insurance premiums tripled overnight, and the ripple effects were only beginning to spread across global supply chains. The longer this war drags on, the deeper the mystery gets. Trump initially told the Daily Mail operations would wrap up within 4 weeks, but on March 6th, he reversed course entirely. There are no time limits. Defense Secretary Hegseth went further, stating the war has only just begun. Iran has fired over 500 ballistic missiles and nearly 2,000 drones since the fighting started. But NDTV reports Iran may have only about 1,000 missiles left. Their firepower is running out, yet Iran still refuses to surrender. Washington demanded unconditional capitulation, but Ali Larijani, head of Iran's Security Council, flatly rejected all negotiations. Here is the biggest mystery: the fracture inside Iran's own leadership. On March 7th, President Pezeshkian publicly apologized to the Gulf states, promising Iran would stop striking its neighbors. Hours later, Parliamentary Speaker Ghalibaf contradicted him on the record, declaring Gulf nations that host U.S. bases remain legitimate targets. The president's own apology was overruled in real time by his own government. With Khamenei dead, Iran is governed by a fragile triumvirate that cannot agree on basic strategy. One part of the regime wants diplomacy, another wants total defiance, and the Revolutionary Guard appears to be operating on its own. Nobody knows who is actually in charge. The second twist hits the global economy like a freight train. South Korea depends on the Middle East for 70% of its crude oil and 20% of its LNG. Reuters reports Japan is even more exposed, relying on the region for 95% of its crude, making these two nations the most energy-vulnerable economies in Asia. Morgan Stanley's numbers are alarming. A 10% oil price rise pushes Korean inflation up 0.6 percentage points, cuts exports by 0.39%, and inflates import costs by 2.68%. Oil has already surged 34% since the war began. That translates to more than 2 full percentage points of additional inflationary pressure right now. The Korea Herald warns that if crude hits $150 a barrel, the Korean economy takes a direct and severe blow. On day one of the war, the Kospi index plunged, giving back gains built during the AI semiconductor boom. The Korean won is falling. Samsung is reviewing supply chains tied to Israel and Iran, and the government is weighing a release from its strategic petroleum reserve. This is not just Korea's problem. 80% of all oil passing through Hormuz heads straight to Asia, making energy diversification an urgent matter of national survival for the entire region. Here is where things stand. The U.S.-Israeli war on Iran is in its 9th day with no end in sight. Supreme Leader Khamenei is dead, and over 1,332 people have been killed inside Iran. 7 American troops are dead, and civilian casualties are mounting across Kuwait, Bahrain, the UAE, and Oman. The Strait of Hormuz is blockaded with 150 ships stuck. Brent crude passed $93, and U.S. gas prices jumped 43 cents in 1 week. Analysts warn that prolonged war could push oil to $150 a barrel and gas above $5 a gallon. Iran refuses unconditional surrender, and Trump says there are no time limits. Axios, citing 4 sources, reports that U.S. and Israeli special forces may enter Iran to secure its nuclear stockpile. This is not a distant conflict. Korea imports 70% of its oil and 20% of its LNG from this region. Japan needs the Middle East for 95% of its crude. Every hour the strait stays closed means higher fuel prices, rising inflation, and economic pain for billions. How this war ends will shape the global economy for the rest of 2026. In our next video, we break down the latest developments and what they mean for your wallet.